And let's bring in NewsNation special correspondent Ross Coulthart. Good morning from Chicago, Ross.
Good morning to you.
We just heard from Brooke. Hundreds of these mystery drones seen up and down the East Coast, specifically over military bases. This was before President Trump was sworn into office. His team then came out saying the drones were authorized to be flown by the FAA. But Ross, I have to ask you, was that answer satisfactory? And what do you hope to get from this hearing today?
I'm afraid it wasn't satisfactory, and a lot of people are looking to the president to get a better briefing, because whoever told him that these were FAA authorized drones being used for research and other purposes misled the president. And I think that's quite shameful. We now know, because of a 60 Minutes story that was run a few weeks ago, that the Pentagon and the intelligence community are in fact still mystified as to the source of these drones, who's sending them. And they don't even know if they're drones because they haven't been able to recover them. Whatever these objects are, they've been able to evade the normal countermeasures that are used against them, normally some kind of electromagnetic pulse weapon. They haven't been able to bring these objects down. So it's very good to see that this committee hearing is happening today, and it's going to be very interesting to see what the Air Force says about the claims that these drones pose a national security threat.
Yeah, the lack of transparency is scary, but knowing they don't know what it is even scarier. Let's start today with that briefing for the GOP Oversight Committee's investigation into UAPs. Like you mentioned, there are going to be some key players in Washington. Who will they be, and what do you hope to hear from them, Ross?
Okay, well, there's been a spanner in the works. There was meant to be a secure compartmented information facility, a SCIF briefing today, where there were going to be confidential briefings from witnesses to the members of the House Oversight and Accountability Committee. That particular hearing has now been delayed. But what is going to happen on Thursday now is there's still going to be a briefing of Congress's Oversight and Accountability Committee by the UAP Disclosure Fund, which is an activist lobby group pushing for UAP disclosure. And we're going to have people like Lua Elizondo, Dr. Eric Davis, Admiral Tim Gallaudet, Mike Gold from NASA, and they're going to be talking to the issue of what issues are posed by these UAPs presenting themselves as they are increasingly in US airspace. And that's going to be the preliminary for what's expected to be a public hearing presided over by Anna Paulina Luna, Representative Anna Paulina Luna, on the 12th of May. So there are three events happening in the Congress. The SCIF briefing, the secret briefing that was meant to be happening today, has been delayed until about the 12th, the week beginning the 12th of May. But we're assured it's still going to be happening.
All right. Wouldn't it be nice if that's what we heard out of the White House? You know what I'm saying? And look, I don't think that the congressman, I think the congressman was a straight shooter there. I just think that there's a little bit more capability and a little bit more concern and a little bit more ease in doing this than's being suggested. How do I know? You're about to find out how. Joining me now is NewsNation national security contributor Tracy Walder. We have her very often using her CIA expertise to help us understand cases, but she was also a drone pilot. Okay, so pretty good credential for tonight. And NewsNation special correspondent Ross Coulthart, who spends so much time talking to sources on the inside about exactly these kinds of capabilities. He's got a great special that you're going to want to see tomorrow night called Drones Over New Jersey. It's good to have both of you. Now, I don't have any problem with what the congressman just said. I think he did a better job than most people in government I've heard. But, Tracy, some of these are big, these drones, like too big to be something that you're buying commercially. And I don't think it's absurd to think that you'd have to run across a field to track them to know where they're landing. I mean, they caught the Chinese guy, right, that they just found at the airport.
Right, you're absolutely right, Chris. Thank you so much for having me. And I actually wholeheartedly agree with the congressman. One of the things that sort of piqued my interest about this is he talked about that Picatinny arsenal that's close by, as well as McGuire Air Force Base. One of the things that they recently did this past summer is successfully tested battery-powered fixed-wing aircraft to deliver cargo between bases. And it is a larger type of drone. It looks very much like an airplane, but obviously is a bit smaller. And so part of me wonders if this could be what individuals are seeing. But to your point, obviously, as someone who worked in, I guess, the depths of our government at the CIA, you know, I get it. When you feel that the government is not being forthcoming and not being honest, I don't believe these are a threat. It's scary. And I do think they need to come clean with the American people about what these are.
One pushback. I have so much tremendous respect for the amount of expertise you developed to be at the CIA, and I'm not a cynic about government. We need transparency, but I think it's amazing what you were able to do for this country, and I appreciate you for it. I just feel like this is, I want your gut before I go to Ross on, I feel like they have to know more, either because they're doing it or because they know what it is, and they're just saying, yeah, there's nothing to it. But I think the people have moved past accepting that kind of answer.
I could not agree with you more. I wholeheartedly agree that they know more about what these are and are just electing not to tell us. But I really do think that we have sort of moved past that mentality of people, I guess, being okay with it. You know, when I started at the CIA in 2000, that was an acceptable excuse. Hey, it's not a threat. Let's just move on. And people really did accept that. But we're not at that place right now. People have a lot of distrust in the government, and I do understand why. And I really do think that, look, I get that we shouldn't be giving sort of the top secret intricacies of what this is, but I do think the government needs to give more information.
Yeah, Ross, I mean, I see this as such an opportunity for them. I see it as a metaphor. Like, you know, this is the same guy, Mayorkas, who's saying no big deal. It's the same thing he said about the border at the Department of Homeland Security. Submarine just completely exploded the Biden administration's credibility on a very major issue. And this is such a great opportunity for them to say one of the two things. We got people like Walter working here. We know exactly what this is. Certain things you need to know, certain things you don't. Or we don't know. We don't know what some of these things are, and we're going to find out because we see what you're seeing, and who's ever doing this, we're saying we're putting a moratorium. You better stop, and if you don't, we're going to catch you like we did the Chinese guy. What do you think from your sources?
Firstly, good evening, Chris. Look, I have to say I vehemently disagree with any assertion that either the FBI or the Defense Department have any idea, any clear idea, what this phenomenon is over the east coast of the United States. I'm talking to people in the FBI who are utterly baffled by this phenomenon. They tell me they do not know what these objects are. They're not getting answers. I'm told, for example, that these objects are the size of an SUV, a large SUV. So the argument from the congressman that these objects are too small to detect is not correct at all. I'm told that there have been attempts to interdict these objects and that there have been the deployment of anti-drone technology. I've just received information in the last few minutes about the PSEG nuclear site at Salem, which is the Hope Creek Generating Station on a 740-acre site in Salem County, New Jersey. And a person who is privileged enough to have access to the internal messaging about that nuclear station has told me that they tried to deploy an anti-drone technology over multiple drones that were seen over the nuclear site, and that anti-drone technology, which normally works on all drones, completely failed. Moreover, these objects, whatever they are being seen not just on the East Coast, they are being seen all over the world. I'm getting reports from here in Australia, from Japan, Indonesia, China, Russia, Europe.
SUV-sized drones in New Jersey. Dozens of reports. Seen near military bases, armories, civilian areas, over people's houses, properties owned by President-elect Trump. The FBI says they've been investigating it for a month. A month? But many, like my next guests, say the response has been tepid. What could they be, and how is this so hard to figure out? Joining us now is New Jersey State Senator John Bramnick and former defense and intel official who investigated UFOs for the federal government, Luis Elizondo. Thank you for having both of you here. I appreciate it. Senator, let me ask you, what do you make of how your requests to satisfy people's curiosity have been met by other officials?
not very well. Either the government doesn't know anything, or the government is in a position where it's an embarrassment to the people of the state of New Jersey, because people already come to the table with distrust of government. This adds to distrust. And I'm deeply concerned that people are going to come up with conspiracy theories. You see them on the internet all the time. So this doubled down, and it double downs on the people who make up theories and also don't trust government. So it has a double whammy on government.
Have they told you anything, Senator, about what to say or what to think?
The only thing I heard is Governor Murphy did a press conference while he was signing another bill, and he indicated he wasn't concerned with the safety of residents. But the residents I represent are deeply concerned that they need a lot more information than a blanket statement that it's still safe out there. That's simply not enough. We're going to have a briefing tomorrow in Trenton, and I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say.
Well, you got a platform here to tell the country what you're finding out and what you're not finding out whenever you want it. Mr. Elizondo, it's good to have you again. What's your guess on this? I mean, look, the good news is you see a lot of navigation lights on these things. You see red and greens on a lot of these, which, as you know, are familiar lighting that people put on drones over a certain size. What's your guess as to why there's so many over Jersey all of a sudden?
Well, Chris, surprisingly enough, it's not just over Jersey. Recently, over a few weeks ago, we had a very similar issue over Langley Air Force Base, one of our most sensitive military installations. And frankly, if you look back the last 4 or 5 years, there was actually a very similar occurrence back in Colorado, where for weeks, local and state law enforcement officials were chasing these things in the skies, almost doing a racetrack pattern, and no one seemed to know what the heck was going on. Actually, this is one of the very reasons why I decided to testify before Congress a few weeks ago, because quite frankly, we don't really have control of our U.S. airspace. We don't have awareness of what are in our skies.
Do you believe that the FBI has been looking for a month and doesn't have any answer about what these are when there's so many?
Well, I've worked with the FBI in the past, and they tend to be very, very competent when they're doing investigations. I do believe they have some answers. I don't think they have all the answers yet. What further makes this more complicated, you have an issue where these things are being seen over civilian airspace, so you have jurisdictional issues, right? You have, from a federal perspective, you have FBI leading the law enforcement investigation, but you also have the Department of Defense. You have folks like the U.S. Air Force and Office of Special Investigations. You have DHS and even the FAA. And so all these federal agencies, forget about even the state and local agencies, are trying to work together and try to deconflict what's in the skies. And unfortunately, they just don't seem to have a common operating picture right now of exactly what we're dealing with.
You think they're wrong about the size? Because, it's not easy to find drones of any significant size on the commercial market.
Yeah, so here's the problem, Chris. Great point. We know that commercial drones tend to be a typical size, and they use a certain amount of power, if you will, and have a certain amount of loiter time, a certain amount of range. And typically can be anywhere between 15, maybe 20 minutes if you're lucky. And then you have to have line of sight in order to control these things. If you talk about anything bigger than that, you're really talking about a state-sponsored capability. This isn't a hobbyist. This isn't a drone that someone buys, let's say, from Radio Shack or buys from Amazon. This is something far more complex that can be flown beyond line of sight, i.e. over the horizon, and has a loiter capability in some cases of several hours. And if you're talking about an SUV size or larger potentially drone, this is a problem. Look, the U.S. Navy has been reporting these types of drones, in some cases the size of cars and even bigger, for years now. And this is exactly emphasizing the point why we need to take this topic seriously.
What's the latest from the sheriff there? What's he saying tonight?
Sure. So he invited us into his nerve center there in the sheriff's office and showed us that heat map. And if you look at it, he's been documenting all the sightings here in Monmouth County. This is really where this all began back in November. So since December 2nd, he's been documenting every possible sighting on this map. And it's just overwhelming when you look at the site, just how many calls have come in. and he's trying to do his best. He's directing everybody to the FBI. He's actually demanding more federal help. He's asked the Governor Murphy here to declare a state of emergency. That has not happened. He's asking Congress to enact some laws around these drones so that, you know, there's GPS tracking available, so we can know like where the operator of these drones are, like we do with planes, like the FAA on these kind of sites that you can track planes on. But he's saying this is a failure from the federal government from the get-go. Take a listen.
If this was a national security concern and a test, we failed miserably, right? When you have kind of a rogue drone flying over Weapons Station Earl and Picatinny Arsenal and some critical infrastructure and closing down airports. I mean, medevac flights have been canceled because of these sightings of drones and drone activity. The airport in New York closed down for a period of time because of drone activity or reported drone activity. When you have that occur, we have a problem with obviously what's going on, and from a public safety standpoint, it's concerning, right? And it's going to be a challenge in the future. We can't have recreational or commercial drones flying over large crowds and audiences, you know, on our beachfront, like with 70,000 people at a concert. That's not going to do it. So we need to change the laws, and again, try to put some of this deconfliction and de-droning capability, or at least drone detection capability, in the state police hands.
So there you have it, Brian. This is the guy who's really at the center of this whole thing, and he's walking the walk. He's asking for change, and hopeful that the feds are going to give us some help here in New Jersey to help detect these things.
Rich, you're an amazing investigative reporter. You've been working on this for like a week now. You saw drones for yourself. What's your sense? I mean, when we see these sound bites from the White House and they're saying, look, this is literally nothing. These are people making mistakes in what they're seeing. These are planes and stars, et cetera. Do you think, are they purposely misleading people, or do you think that that is what they actually believe? Do they really not know what's going on? Are we all just crazy?
I think this is a complicated. Thank you for saying that, Brian. But I think this is a complicated answer, so I'll take it in parts. I think the government, number one, knows more than they're telling us, and I think that's evidenced by the fact that military bases are saying we're seeing these things, and then John Kirby, the security advisor, is saying we're no credible threats, or that was his initial statement last week. So there's more going on there. They're saying, look, a lot of these are planes. I asked Sean Golden, the sheriff, that, do you think the majority of these calls are planes? And he believes that a healthy majority likely are planes. Just in full transparency, Brian, I kicked the tires on my reporting last week. I asked every possible expert. I asked a former CIA person. I asked a CEO of a drone company to look at our footage, and I asked an aviation expert who's got 43 years as a pilot, both military and commercial pilot. What do you see? What are we seeing? This is crazy. And the CEO of the drone company says, I think these are planes in your footage. And to my surprise, the aviation expert, the pilot of 43 years, says, I think I see drones. So it just goes to show you, nobody knows what we're seeing up in these skies, and that's why the lack of information is so key. And if the government knows what's actually happening, if there is some program, they should come out and tell us, so everybody's not looking up at the sky wondering, is this a drone over my house? Because it's freaking people out. Kids are asking all sorts of questions. We don't have answers, and there's really no end in sight with this, Brian.
Yeah, and look, I mean, with planes, you can go to like FlightAware. You can see the plane where it is in the exact moment. It makes sense that they should do that for drones. At least people could track them then, know what they're looking at, not be totally freaked out, know where the drone came from. It's wild. It's a wild story. Rich McHugh, thank you again for staying on top of it. We'll check back in with you. We're calling these UFOs drones, but how do we know? How do we even know if they're really drones? We don't really know what they are.
And we're finally getting some long-awaited answers into those mystery drones flying over the Northeast. In her first briefing since taking over as White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt offered some answers that Americans have been waiting for months.
After research and study, The drones that were flying over New Jersey in large numbers were authorized to be flown by the FAA for research and various other reasons.
Joining me now is Sean Golden, Sheriff in Monmouth County, New Jersey. Sheriff Golden, good morning. And I have to believe that you're one of those people who are like, you could have told us this months ago, people.
Yeah, good morning, Nick. I tell you what, it's a little bit disappointing and concerning still at the same time. I mean, had they just put that simple statement out, we wouldn't have wasted so many resources. It's disappointing that we had to have the Department of Homeland Security from D.C. in here with special equipment. It's disappointing that the FBI had to waste all their man hours on a tip line for hundreds and hundreds of phone calls. And it's disappointing on the local and county level here, where we had to do the same thing, wasting our resources and putting our residents in fear and an apprehensive state. All that combined, I mean, one simple statement from the FAA or the federal government, and I want to thank President Trump for at least putting it out there. Still, there's more questions. I mean, you know, we had these episodes in Northern Virginia and the state of New Jersey. We got to get better at this. I'm going to continue pushing Congress, and my Congressman Chris Smith has done a great job in pushing it for hearings on this. But let's bring the FAA in and say, why didn't they notify local state officials so that we didn't waste all these resources? That's really the primary thing here is we need better communication, we need better deconfliction, and we need transparency when it comes to drone operations in the future.
But Sheriff Golden, I have to believe that it assuages some of your concerns, learning that it was FAA approved, it's not the enemy, but you don't seem completely satisfied with this explanation.
No, I do think that there has to be a change in the law and procedures. I said this all along. We need better communication, particularly when there's going to be these operations, at least with the state police regional intelligence centers in each state, so that they're aware and they can notify local law enforcement on notifications to say, hey, we do have some type of operation going. I mean, that's all the people in New Jersey wanted, right? If they told us it was a military exercise, if they told us it was research exercise, that's all well and good. We would have went about our business, but we wasted a lot of law enforcement resources on multiple levels trying to track these things down and get the federal government involved. And I think the Biden administration was a little disingenuous in not coming forward with a simple statement that said we're doing some research, and that would have put a lot to bed for us.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty easy thing to explain, because it was just about a month ago that then President-elect Trump said that our military knew what was going on and was just refusing to tell the public.
Yeah, listen, we should all be relieved that we do know what was going on, and certainly it's not a foreign adversary, so that's a check mark in the good side. Again, the negatives to all this is that there wasn't any transparency, there wasn't any communications. We need to get Congress to investigate this a little bit more, hold some hearings, get the FAA involved, but more importantly, get local law enforcement, get the Sheriff's Association, the Chiefs Association. Our New Jersey State Police, led by Colonel Callahan, is one of the best in the country. We certainly can have input on what new regulations would look like so that we don't have this conflict and we have some transparency in operations.
And Sheriff Golden, simply put, let us know what's going on so that we can be part of the process and tell our public something. Yeah,
that's correct, Nick. I mean, again, we're gonna push for that transparency. I commend the Trump administration for at least putting this out there, but I think there's more questions still than answers. It's a simple statement, certainly put it to bed for us, but we got to dive down. Drones aren't going away. We need a better process in place for the future.
Sheriff Sean Golden, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Nick.
Billy Nolan has 30 years of experience in aviation and once served as the acting administrator for the FAA. Billy, thank you so much for being with me on Morning in America.
Good morning, Marky. Thank you for having me on this morning.
So the FAA temporarily banning drone flights above 22 areas of New Jersey. For starters, talk me through how significant and how rare that kind of move is.
Well, let me just say, you look at our nation's airspace, and there are roughly about 1 million plus drones that operate in the NAS. And of that number, roughly half of those are doing commercial operations. So think things like getting medicine, getting supplies, getting shipments from, a major, e-retailer, right? So those are happening. And then the other half is roughly recreational flights. And now folks who fly drones, number one, they are required to register. There's something called remote ID that identifies the drone, identifies the location of the operator, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So So, and there have been provisions all along for what we call critical infrastructure, think military air bases, electrical facilities, power stations, et cetera, that have been in place.
But have you seen this kind of ban before? I mean, in your time as acting FAA, administrator, was this something that you ever issued yourself or have seen?
No, I did not, and certainly I received classified briefings every week during my time as FAA administrator. So you're forever looking at these things. This is probably out of an abundance of caution, if you will, right? To say to the public who are flying drones, especially recreational drone operators who may not be as steeped in all the requirements as someone who's doing commercial operations. So you want to make sure that, number one, they understand what the rules set are. They understand the places where they can and cannot operate. It's limited to 400 feet AGL, above ground level and below. I mean, you're a pilot, you know that sometimes the skies look empty, but we are just seeing, a rapid increase in the number of drone operations across the country.
The other thing that's just fascinating is that this ban also comes with the warning, right, that deadly force could be used against drones that pose an imminent threat. They're flying illegally. If nothing nefarious is going on, as the White House says, why would that be necessary, Billy?
Well, I think, again, it's an opportunity to just reaffirm. You get to this time of year, Christmas next week, and this is the time of year where you see a lot more folks, I want a drone for Christmas, or I want this for Christmas. So this is just a reminder by the FAA that you're required to operate by a set of rules. And those rules can be fairly restrictive. You cannot fly over an airport. You cannot fly over military installations. There are parts within city and localities that have their own sets of restrictions there. So I think this is just an opportunity to get out ahead of this on the part of the FAA to say that those flying drones, you've just got to make sure that you are abiding by the rules and not put anyone or anything in harm's way.
Lastly, before I let you go, are you confident that this isn't at the hands of a foreign adversary? And what do you tell Americans who are worried and they look up at the night sky and they don't know what's going on night after night for weeks on end?
Yeah. Well, our skies can be pretty crowded at times. I feel fairly confident. And of course, Secretary Mayorkas was on and talked about. So I'm going to leave it to the folks who are sitting at the desk and in the know every single day in terms of, how well we are protected within the United States. So I do have a sense of comfort there. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't be vigilant, right? And then I think this is the signal that the FAA is sending as well to the public, that we will always be vigilant. And to the extent that we find people who are not doing what they should be doing, the FAA can use every means at its disposal to sort of put a cease and desist, if you will, out there.
Yeah, well, it's just been such a bizarre story that's officially reached this fever pitch, that ban lasting until January 17th. Billy Nolan, I know you've been a hot commodity. Everybody wanting to talk to you, so thank you for giving us a few minutes of your time on a Friday.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks again for having me on this morning.
Yeah, talk to you again soon.
Joining us now is someone with a lot of firsthand experience on the matter, Belleville, New Jersey Mayor Michael Mellon. Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for joining us. What's your reaction to this FAA ban on drones, drones operating in several parts of the state, although we should note it's not in your community?
Yeah, I am skeptical. I'm not quite sure what it's going to do. I mean, I'm glad finally we're seeing the federal government take action. Unfortunately, we're not seeing them tell us much or answer any questions or explain much. But the fact that they are taking action is a first step. However, as you duly noted, this new action only takes place for 22 areas here in New Jersey, and Belleville is not one of them.
How big are those areas, those 22 areas?
They range from the largest cities. I saw Newark on that list, Jersey City on that list, and some critical, infrastructure. And that's what they said. They said that they're working to make sure they have assets down around the areas. They don't want drones flying around our critical infrastructure. But, the one thing that nobody's really talking about is the fact that we were told in our first briefing about a week ago that the drones that we are spotting, and this is coming directly from the New Jersey State Police, the drones that we've witnessed hovering over our critical infrastructure are not emitting a radio frequency. That discounts. These are not personal drones. These aren't even commercial drones. They are not emitting a radio frequency, which is why they've been so difficult to track and which is why we can't jam them to send them down. So if the federal government is sending assets here that have the ability to jam the drones, well, guess what? They know better. they're not emitting a radio frequency. I'm not quite sure it's going to do much.
Well, we know that if they're recreational drones, according to FAA guidelines, but also according to, I think, to the way I'm not a drone operator, so I don't know this exactly, but a drone operator has to be within line of sight of his or her drone, and a recreational drone can't go over the horizon or over a hill or something, and because you'll lose the signal.
Yeah, no, this is absolutely true. So the law changed here. I've become quite of a bit of a drone expert in the last 7 days or so, but the law changed here in 2023, where a licensed pilot, whether you are an operator who's got a personal drone or a commercial drone, you can fly at night. There's nothing wrong with flying a drone at night. However, as you mentioned, you have to have a line of sight. Well, guess what? 2 Sundays ago, we had a mayor in West Milford. It's about 80 acres and has about 4 different reservoirs that feed northern New Jersey. She had 60 drones over her reservoirs. Those are not personal drones or commercial drones. There were not 60 people that had lines of sight. So our our state government here in New Jersey literally told us that they're not emitting a radio frequency, and they do not believe the operators are in sight. Therefore, they're probably not personal or commercial drones. It's either our federal government or some kind of foreign actor.
All right. Mayor of Belleville, New Jersey, Michael Mellon, thank you so much for joining us.
It's not about danger, aliens. It's about why there isn't danger. How do you know? Why can't he explain that? Independent journalist Michael Schellenberger says, listen, the government isn't being straight with us, and there's a reason. He's out with a new report on this on his Substack Public. It is a must subscribe. And he joins us now. First, all the best to you and the family for a blessed Christmas and New Year.
Happy holidays to you, Chris. Good to see you.
So, Mike, what do you know? Why do you think they're not being straight with us?
Well, look, I mean, I think in that one clip you just showed, Biden does something very similar that Defense Department spokesperson John Kirby did last week, which is that they say on the one hand, they say, we're looking into it. Then 3 days later, Kirby said, okay, we've looked into it, implying that they had looked into nearly 6,000 cases in about 2 or 3 days, which is very difficult to believe. I've been asking the FBI and the DOD and the DHS, FAA for the data. They won't share it with me. Biden similarly said, yeah, we looked into it. There's nothing to worry about, and we're still looking into it. So you sort of see these two things going on. They say they're looking into it, but they already looked into it. That's one of the many fishy things. The other one is that they'll sort of say, well, we know that there's nothing to worry about and there's no anomalies. And then other times they'll say, we know there's nothing to worry about, but we haven't figured out what all the drone incursions are. Chris, I think it's important for people to know that this has evolved from being a story about ordinary citizens seeing very unusually shaped drones or so-called drones, unidentified drones, over their homes in New Jersey, to really a broader question of why have they been letting all these drone incursions occur over U.S. military bases? I mean, I didn't realize how prevalent this was. I mean, it's Langley for 17 days. This was written up in the in the Wall Street Journal last month. 17 days of being able to stop unidentified drones flying over Langley, but also Picatinny Arsenal, Naval Weapons Station Earl, 4 separate U.S. military bases in Britain, 1 military base in Germany, Camp Pendleton, one of the most important Marine Corps bases in Southern California, Air Force Plant 42 Skunk Works, where they developed the stealth bomber, where they're developing stealth fighters, Hill Air Force Base in Utah, the Minuteman silos in Northeast Colorado. I mean, that's just a partial list of all the places where they have had uncontrolled drone incursions. The idea that that's not something you would worry about is absurd. Controlling airspace has been one of the main goals of the Air Force since World War II. It's a pride of the Air Force that they control the airspace. And of course, the base commanders have been worried about this. They've been developing counter-drone technologies. It's not working. So I think, look, not to bury the lead a little bit here, but the U.S. military doesn't control U.S. airspace either over homes in New Jersey or over our most sensitive military installations.
So I had Crenshaw and Berra on the other night, which was very impressive to me because Republican and Democrat. on the screen at the same time, both saying that they want to deal with this. Both of them came out of the classified session saying, look, I don't think that these are bad actors that are up there. And I think this is really about the government not having its game together in terms of who's supposed to deal with this. And maybe we have to do something as Congress to create standards and create funding for the kinds of detection systems that they don't have now and figure out what the system of hierarchy is. Does that make sense?
I mean, of course, I agree that they need to sort out who has the power to go after these drones. You do want some local and state authority to be able to go after them. But I mean, Chris, if we really thought that those drones were threatening people, then they would have scrambled fighter jets, and there's all this concern about, oh, the dangers of knocking them down. Look, I agree. On the one hand, I don't think there's any evidence that the drones are being controlled by a foreign power. The people that have asserted that. It's been a game of telephone where you've seen people sort of say the Iranians or the Chinese. It lacks both motive and mechanism to pull off an operation like that. If
the
they
loose
were to
nuke
do
stuff
it,
is no good too. And then
What's
your
that?
pal Rogan said it makes them, and the loose nukes thing was a dumb thing also. And then your pal Rogan says it's the best explanation he's heard, and it goes viral. This is the problem when government isn't transparent. You create a vacuum, and it gets filled with poo-poo.